Hello, world.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Vile and I back for another governance study group session. I'm actually located in Southern California, doing a little traveling, and the EOS SoCal guys right here were nice enough to host me for this episode. And so check it out if you guys are in the LA area. EOS SoCal, Rancho Cucamonga is the city they're located, and it's a very nice office. You can see in the background like the Bitcoin sign here. Rotate around. I don't know if you guys can see, but and then there's the EOS. See the EOS sign, and so anyways, so it's a nice location here. And Vile, how's everything going with you? And I forgot to mention, it's Caesar and Alex here at EOS SoCal in this office. So Caesar Diaz and Alex. So, but anyway, Vile, where are you these days?
No, at the moment I'm still at Gibraltar. I arrived last week, and I will be here until Monday. Then I will fly to Malta, and I will be there for a week or so, and then back to Finland. So now greetings from Gibraltar.
Wow, Gibraltar. Was there a conference there? Or?
Oh no, I'm working for a company called Token Market, which is headquartered here, and we are doing security token stuff. So
Token Market. I think I've heard of that, but we can that's interesting. We can talk more about that maybe another time. Maybe you can also just briefly mention what Token Market does.
Oh well, we used to be just an ICO advisory service, but including token issuance and smart contracts and things like that. But now we are going to security token market.
Okay. Yeah, I think who's running that? Who's the founder, CEO of that?
Oh well, CEO is Ransu Salovaara and CTO is Mikko Ohtama.
Okay.
Both are Finns.
Okay.
And we have offices in Helsinki, Gibraltar, and London. And I was at the London office, then I went to the Gibraltar office, and yeah. So should we look through your 2.1 constitution?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get started with that. And if you have the link, that'd be great, because I'm gonna have to find the link myself.
I'm not sure if that is GDPR compatible, because it has an email address that you accidentally shared with me. The link.
Let me see. Let me share the link here. I think I just pulled it up here. Oh, whoops. Yeah, that's sorry about that. I don't know why that keeps popping up. So let me see here real quick. Yeah, that's an invite. So let me just remove that. I don't know why. Okay, so let me give you another link. I don't know how to erase that, but so use this link. So yeah, that other one has some kind of invitation script or something on the URL, but see if the other one works. So just a little background about this version 2.1 of the Constitution. I think in past discussions we were trying to figure out if there was anything needed to add to version 2 of the Constitution. We discussed version 1 and version 2 in the past, and it seemed to be that the consensus was that version 2 had the most support. And over time, I realized that was kind of the one I preferred. And so anyways, the only thing other than version 2 was just maybe adding something was the idea, adding something that I thought was missing, which was just really the current parameters of the blockchain, which is, you know, the inflation rate, the process to elect block producers, certain processes that were not listed on any of the constitutions we or any of the proposed constitutions we have. So that was the idea. It was really simply just to add a little bit more clarity on that and just be explicit about everything that happens in our DPoS system. So is that how you understood it, Vile?
Oh, yep, yeah. That's the starting point is good, I think. So it's because version 2, I think that the pro of version 2 is that it's short and relatively simple. So the constitutional layer remains thin.
Yeah, so that was the foundation, and really, it's essentially a lot of it is from version 2. Just if you look at version 2.1, it's just a rearrangement of where the clauses are. It's just ordered differently, and then things are just added to it that are more procedural, like how do you get how are block producers voted in. What are the parameters for inflation, things like that. So aside from that, it seems, like especially the first 2 clauses or articles in version 2 are in there. I actually eliminate 3 through 9 because version 2 had a lot of articles about liability for token holders, and I thought that was not enforceable. So I decided to make it as narrow as possible, which is essentially eliminating anything that had to do with token holders and specifically focus on block producers on the system. And the reason why is that you can actually have them sign or affirm kind of an agreement. And it's you don't have to get everybody to opt into something at the base layer. You can just assume that no one's going to read these agreements and that there's not going to be any obligation on the users when they use the platform. The only purpose of the Constitution is to limit the power of the block producers. And and the analogy would be that the U.S. Constitution just limits the power of government, doesn't limit the power of any citizens, right? So at least the U.S. Constitution. So I was trying to model it after that, where the government has to take an oath and affirm the Constitution. If you just look at the U.S. Constitution, you can kind of, if you read it again, you can see that, hey, there's nothing that really deals with us. It doesn't it doesn't restrict us from doing anything. It only restricts the government from doing things.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the mindset. It was like, okay, try to make it as logical as possible, and just model it after the U.S. Constitution, which I think is probably one of the most elegantly written and precise constitutions that are out there. That's, maybe I'm biased because I'm from the U.S. and I haven't read all the other constitutions, but I just have, it's just something that maybe from my kind of learnings of history is it seems that there were a lot of brilliant people involved in it. Specifically, James Madison was the main person who drafted it, so at least the structure the content was, of course, through many was based on a lot of conventions and debates between the founding fathers in the U.S. So anyway, so that gives some context. Why I kind of just decided to eliminate it, to just eliminate more of the token holder obligations and just focused on the block producers. Really, because that's where the power is. They're the executive branch. They're also the judicial branch in version 2. And we're the legislative branch, where we get to write whatever articles or we can decide on the parameters or anything that's involved in the blockchain. So anyway, so Vila, any comments about that?
First, I would. You were right when you were messaging me a few days ago that there would be kind of technical input needed, because this is really nice in legal point of view, but technically there are for example parameters specified which could, if we want to express those in Ricardian contract, those could be specified somewhere else. For example, we have few other contracts that a lot of users interact with. For example, or the people who participate, which is like rec producer, where you insert yourself as a block producer. Then you have sell RAM, buy RAM. All these actions contain their own Ricardian contract. So last time I was throwing around the idea of constitutionless constitution, and I was only half joking because it's there are a lot of actions on EOS which are associated with Ricardian smart contracts. So we could distribute many things to different Ricardian smart contracts around the system. So a lot of these parameters here discuss something which could be specified somewhere else, and also I'm not sure, do we need to discuss technical parameters like RAM token and so on, because these are inherent to the design, because for example with RAM, block producers should provide the RAM as actual RAM. So that's why when EOS was launched, there wasn't really a good mechanism to force RAM usage growth, because that would mean that block producers should get more RAM physically. So that's why RAM is really difficult, because easily you end up in a situation where you either hoard it for yourself and speculate with the price, or then you can just reserve it to hinder the block producers and make them buy RAM every other week. So these kind of technical issues are here, but legally this seems nice. It's like modern constitution would be, but would you like to go the intent, or would you like to have more technical feedback?
So yeah, and just for some background, I kind of messaged Vile about the idea of trying to get the Constitution to be more like a Ricardian, and so that's why he's been explaining kind of some of the issues with just Ricardian contracts and what might or might not be in the or what should or shouldn't be in the Constitution. So the idea was that, hey, if we're going to have these very important parameters, we should also make the Constitution more like a Ricardian to have that explicit in it. So there's, and then I think Ville was mentioning you may put some of the things or may not, and and we're trying to discuss, okay, how technical should we be? So the thought I had was that, okay, yeah, it makes it very difficult to read if you do have too much technical jargon and parameters. So I don't know how the current Ricardian contracts were, I guess, I haven't read these Ricardian contracts, but just looking at the Constitution and trying to find a way to make it readable, I was thinking that rather than having these kind of bracketed parameters inserted in the like human readable text, that we would just have a glossary that essentially associated these words to the appropriate parameters after the document, or at the end of the document, right? So that at least for those who, that would kind of minimize the confusion on the text side. And on the code side, there'd be references specific for specific words would be associated with these parameters. And I was thinking maybe Ricardians should generally be like that too, because it's just it displays better. It's more aesthetic. I mean, it's more less confusing that way. What are your thoughts about that, Ville?
Oh, well, we can definitely make a Ricardian version out of it. I will send a link on GitHub. There are all kinds of Ricardian contracts. I haven't checked how up to date those are, but for example, from EOS.io.system, you can see more of the Ricardian contracts, and the So basically, there you can see how at the moment different parts of the system work, and Ricardian contract can be binded to an action or a smart contract. So because smart contract reacts to actions. So for example, we have this delegate bandwidth, for example, which is an action. It's part of the system smart contract. So basically, this is a contract where you enter into when you get yourself some bandwidth.
So I'm looking at that. So the action, it's delegate BW essentially with the brackets, right? The curly brackets on both sides. So that's what I'm looking at in the GitHub governance /EOSIO.system /EOSIO.system -delegate BW -RC.MD. So that's what I'm looking at. And maybe I'll just put that link right there.
Oh, there should be a link.
Okay, so yeah, so you have that. So that's pretty much yeah. So it's interesting how that's written. It's almost like that's good, and. Okay, so there's two things. You're saying there's an action and there's a smart contract. When I look at the Constitution, there's often an action and almost like an object, because you have tokens. That's to me like an object, right? And then
you think it that way.
Yeah, and then like an action would be. In the one I was looking at in terms of the Constitution, it would be something like, voting is that action, right? And buying and selling, because we wrote about the marketplace for RAM. It's like if you want to put that in the Constitution, that would be another action, and then the object would be either RAM tokens or EOS tokens. So
I will send you a link to the actual system voting contract. So this is the one that you will enter when you vote for block producer. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
Yeah, that's great. So this is good because they really do a good job really describing it. And so when we refer to this action, we have a very descriptive Ricardian for that particular action. And so what we can do is we could just maybe do two things. We can just use these Ricardian parameters in the Constitution, or just put it in the glossary, right? Because if we want to make it readable, it's probably, especially for new people who want to just read it without like kind of getting slowed down by these bracketed terms. We can. So anyways, you could do it two ways. You can just insert it in the Constitution itself, or just have kind of a glossary at the end. But this is good that we can actually see the Ricardian contracts and see what it looks like. So,
and this was the reason why I was proposing the constitutionless model, because basically there is always some way you interact with the system contract, and the system contract has the constitution also, but system contract has also all of these actions that I just posted there. So I was thinking, because someone mentioned that constitution should be very simple, so I proposed this approach that what if we would have constitution at all? What if we would just distribute all the text, all the legal prose to these actions that you have to take? For example, new account. You cannot do anything on EOS or EOS IO blockchains without an account. So someone creates you an account, and there your journey to the legal world starts. So there is always something that you interact with the system contract. And if we don't want to have general binding base layer arbitration or definition of member or something like that, why not to have the constitution distributed to different actions instead of one constitution?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I think we might be able to get there eventually, and and that's really relying on everything just being in code or Ricardian, and not really having any document outside of that. So I think that's one approach. Yeah, that can be viable. I do think there's maybe some expectation that it's it'll make it that it'll be easier for the regular person to understand what's going on in the system, and so that's I think the balance we have to make. So yeah, that's another approach. Just make it without a constitution, and so maybe if there's enough support for that, Ville, there you can gain some traction. So we're kind of proposing a lot of different alternatives. So there's version 1, base layer arbitration. Version 2, no base layer arbitration. The only thing I wanted to add to the version 2, which is on version 2.1 on the Google Doc, is essentially explaining the current parameters. We could go constitutionless, like Vile mentioned, but we'll see. But it would probably be only kind of supported by a lot of the programmers, I guess, and not so much the average token holder. But any other ideas out there? I mean, these were kind of the ways we were thinking about, changing whatever we had, or changing any of the existing proposals, or ideas about entirely new constitutions. So anybody have any thoughts about that? Any comments either about what Vile said about the constitutionless system? Any ideas about the one I did, that I just added the current parameters to version 2? Let me know in the audience. And hey, Todor, John, Shaheen. Hey, Justin.
Hello, everyone. This is also like you mentioned that normal user, the Joe average user, doesn't really want to collect all the pieces of the Ricardian contract and build their own picture what they are getting into. But I think that this is surprisingly a user interface issue also, because Scatter lets you see, will show you the Ricardian contract regarding the action that you are going to take on the blockchain. It's not, you have to click it to see it. But then you can read the contract. For example, when you are in Monster EOS, when you are creating a new monster, you are able to see it from the Scatter UI. You are able to see the contract. But yeah, you are right. The average user doesn't know where to look. But many of the things are unreachable from the average Joe. For example, block producer liabilities. So that would be part of the rec producer action. So average Joe wouldn't need to care what block producer liabilities are, because he's not one. But I agree. Constitutionless system would be a bit hard to propose, use, and manage. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Maybe in the future. So hey, yeah. Justin. Yeah. Justin, there's 2 Justins here.
Hello, both.
And so going back to what you were talking about, Scatter and user. I guess users being able to accept terms. I was thinking that's probably necessary. If going by version 2 of the Constitution, I'd figure that would be necessary for the dApp layer, where there's user agreements built in for all the dApps. So there has to be eventual acceptance from users. At the base layer, what are your thoughts? Because I actually thought, hey, let's just eliminate all the articles that talked about liability, which was articles 3 through, I think, 8. Hey, how's it going, Tanish? So 3 through 8 in version 2, I actually just said, hey, do we really need these terms that remove liability from the token holders? I mean, it to me was just it was just one of those things that I didn't think you could enforce. It's just these statements that weren't binding, because the assumption is that users aren't going to even read the Constitution, right? And so if we could limit the scope of what the Constitution, the purpose was of the Constitution, we could just limit it to a very narrow group of people, again, like either the government or the block producers or anybody that potential who have power in the system. So, and it was just to constrain the powers of the government, constrain the powers of whatever in EOS, it would be powers of the block producers. And if we did have an base layer arbitration, it would be the same. You would limit the powers of the arbitration and the block producers, and that would be the purpose of it. And those would be the only parties who would consent, take an oath, affirm that they will agree to this constitution, and we wouldn't have to deal with anybody else outside of that. So, what do you think of that idea?
That's really good idea. And until now, I never thought that the U.S. Constitution would be just about the government. But you're right. Okay. It's a good point.
Yeah, there's this anarchist Lysander Spooner. His book was called No Treason, Constitution of No Authority. So his argument was that the Constitution has no authority over people in general, and it makes sense the way he presented it, and so he makes a lot of great arguments. The only addition that I would add, and I don't know if he specified this, is that it was really a contract with the government themselves. It was almost like a contract that said, okay, you're going to be like part of this government, and this contract is just between everybody who accepts it. They just have to take an oath and affirm that they're going to uphold it if they want to be part of this government, and that's it. It was just like this this agreement between the governors, right? And so that was the one thing. If Lysander did not address that, he might have. The only thing I would kind of maybe add to the perspective that the Constitution has no authority, and we can see that it's the same problems that we're confronted with, where users are just not even going to be looking at the Constitution, right? We'll probably have a small percentage that will read it, understand it, and so that was, to me, like logically more of a pure approach, where we have to expect that, and it's not like people are signing these agreements, and it's actually more efficient that way. So, are there any thoughts about that? It's a little bit tricky because, most people think about the Constitution in a different way. So you have to kind of get over that hurdle first to accept that, hey, maybe the U.S. Constitution does not apply to me. It just really applies to people indirectly to me, because it restricts the government from doing anything to me. So
and I think that's straightforward. That the power of the Constitution would be applied to and through block producers. So I think because the starting point of maintenance of the network is that block producers know what they are doing, and block producers will create the environment for the token holders, and token holders will the system will give them free money because they keep the system up for token holders. So I think that it would be straightforward to because they are already taking care of the technical part of the network. Why not the contractual part of maintaining it fairly? So yeah.
That's great to hear. Great to hear.
Yeah, it's quite logical.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's great to hear. To have your agreement on that. Anybody in the audience? Is everyone following this conversation? I guess that's the other thing, because it's a little it's a little unusual, like the way the Constitution is being interpreted. And I think my battery. I gotta plug in here real quick. So let me take care of something real quick. But maybe the audience, if you guys have any comments or thoughts, or maybe any kind of different perspectives about that. So, and let me plug in my computer too. So I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, I will also reposition myself so the light wouldn't always shine there.
All three of us. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right, Justin just says, "Ha ha." That's it. That's all we get.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so Todor has the comment. So yeah, from a default viewpoint that everyone is free to do anything to you, absolute freedom, you could view the Constitution as just a set of restrictions that the government imposes on itself on what they can do to you, and you can always choose to oppose them, I guess. Okay, yeah, that's generally the gist of at least my interpretation of the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution specifically, because I haven't read anything other than that. So,
Yeah,
and it's funny, like you look at it, it's like, I think the Bill of Rights maybe is a little bit more confusing because it kind of applies like these, but it's not like it restricts the people. It just restricts the government from doing anything to the people, and it's still like the government that is ultimately what the Constitution is for. And then the 10th Amendment actually specifies that anything that's not written in any the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is reserved for the people, right? So there's the 10th Amendment, and there's actually a movement to kind of to spread awareness about the 10th Amendment. So it's like anything that's not written in the Constitution does not imply that they're limiting anything. And they're not limiting anything beyond that. So in terms of people's rights. So, but that's from the absolute anarchist point of view. But true. But I guess you can argue that maybe there's some implied social contract if you're not kind of using that point of view. Another way to look at it is that anyone who wants to be part of the nation agrees with each other to follow a common set of rules. So it would be an agreement between everyone. So Todor mentions that. So that there's some kind of social contract. I think that most people think of it that way. The kind of the last part that I kind of read out what Todor mentioned, which I think is true. I think there's this at least the most people, they would think of the Constitution in that way. But if you really read it line by line, and if you try to take a logical view of exactly what, how it reads and who it addresses, and I think the more the anarchist view actually makes more sense. So that's what I would argue, because to be a real contract, like, again, we'll go back to Lysander Spooner's arguments, like, our ancestors created this thing. Well, I haven't signed anything. My parents haven't signed anything. These guys 200 years ago, they wrote something. But why does that apply to me, right? It's like, it has no authority, right? Why does it? So anyway, so those are some of the major arguments that Lysander had, and it makes sense. So check that book out if you guys want more the philosophical view of the Constitution. So any other comments? And we'll probably wrap up pretty quickly here, maybe in another 10 minutes or so, because I'm I have to kind of take care of some things a little bit after. So does anybody have any other comments? Do you guys agree with, do you guys want it to be more of a user agreement where everybody, we expect everybody to agree to its terms, or maybe just leave it to the dApp layer where people can opt into individual dApps that have their own user agreements? Because if we try to create this all-encompassing document for everybody, we have the realities of trying to have acceptance And in legal terms, I think you need like informed consent on top of acceptance. So you need a signature. They have to understand what they're doing. So Justin says, or Justin Guidici, I hope I pronounced that right, Guidici. I think more needs to be left to the dApp layer, personally. We need to keep the base layer of governance as light as possible. So yeah, I agree with that as well. That's a good point. Yeah, light is great. Minimalist is kind of what we should strive for. Otherwise, we are just replicating what we have now, is what Justin says. So Shashin asks, do we have acceptance of the U.S. Constitution? I don't recall signing anything. Exactly. Yeah, that's that's Lysander Spooner's big argument. Like we no one has ever signed anything, who has read the Constitution, right? Maybe it's standard in school these days, but it's very it's kind of not a big focus even in our public education. So Justin Buck says, I think our governance model should generally be about aligning incentives so that true democratization, our governance from the bottom up, can lead to consensus, to be as optimistic as possible. Incentives are incredibly important. Is trying to create a bottoms-up system is also important. I think broadly, I definitely think if there's an efficient way to do that, that's where you get informed consent and acceptance. And to me, that's a far stronger foundation than this document that's supposed to just apply to everybody, that was written 200 years ago, that just should automatically apply, right? So, and Justin Guidici says you just can't easily move, move to other countries, I guess. I guess the reality is that whatever the government imposes on you, regardless of how you interpret it, we're going to still confront the reality that people have a different perspective of what they're able to do, especially government. So we see that in the U.S. already. So Tanish says, I haven't read my constitution. Damn, they copied everything from other countries and they got the longest constitution. So okay.
What is your jurisdiction?
I'm assuming is it in India? Is my guess. Tanish, India. Okay.
Because in Finland, we didn't have constitution until 2000.
Wow.
Because despite we turned 100 last year, we had 3 different contracts which were considered to be constitutional alike. So those constituted the constitution. So later it was decided that, well, we need a real constitution, and then Finland just decided to have one. So that's very modern because it's less than 20 years old. So it's quite interesting. It's relatively short also.
Okay, that's a good thing. So yeah, shorter the better. I think Tanish would probably agree with that as well. And just real briefly, in Finland, then the 3 contracts, as you call it, what were they? Was it?
I will check that for you because I don't remember on top of my head.
So that probably proves our point that most people don't read or understand kind of their own constitutions, right? Like, and that's the same thing in the U.S. Like, I probably wouldn't have probably wouldn't have known until like kind of got more deeply involved in kind of political stuff. So yeah, but most people, despite public education or any education, like it's not a focus, right, to understand it. Even the political process in general, like I don't remember learning a whole lot about it. It's just maybe one lesson or something in our public education about like the political process. So
I will copy paste from English Wikipedia. Oh, my message is too long, so so I will copy a link instead, because there is the first second paragraph technically outlining what it was. So there was this Constitution Act, Parliament Act, Ministerial Responsibility Act, and Act on the High Court of Impeachment. So those were constituting our constitution before, but then we were deciding like, well, let's have one.
Okay. So they seem like separate powers that these contracts applied to, and they kind of maybe combine the various either limitations on powers or just descriptions of what the powers were responsible for, and they just combined it, it seems. But we'll go check that out as a history lesson. So, any other comments, guys? We should probably wrap up in about 5 minutes, and then Ville and I might just collaborate with Ville to try to figure out like the Ricardian part to see if it makes sense to add more of these Ricardian parameters somehow in the Constitution, if that makes sense or if it doesn't. One other big question too, if there's no other questions, is do you agree that we should have these significant parameters described in the Constitution, which is inflation rate, process for electing BPs, compensation for BPs? Like in the U.S. Constitution, they do specify that these like whatever member would have compensation, but they didn't specify the details of that. But there is a specific clause that states that they will be compensated. So anyway, so it's kind of similar in that way too. Like we're just being more specific about exactly what the compensation is. Inflation rate is big. I mean, you imagine if it's not stated, I mean, who's going to decide? Where is it going to be stated that what the inflation rate is, right?
But that was originally meant to be a referendum issue, or then worker proposal fund issue, where the rest of the tokens would be burned. So
my
idea.
Oh, sorry about that. So my argument is, if we don't have it explicitly written in the Constitution, can block producers just upgrade software and change the inflation rate to 4 to 10 and not be limited just because the block producers can do that, right?
Oh well, that's
an upgrade on a software upgrade instead of a referendum issue. So that's why if we are explicit about that, we can say that any changes to this Constitution has to be by referendum. But if we never have it in the first place, then it could be a software upgrade, and no one would know that inflation just went up by from 4 to 10. All right.
Oh yeah. Well, but there is this assumption that BPs wouldn't collude, which is now controversial. There were some emails which were really interesting in that front. but we kind of because we think that if you try to update the software by yourself, the rest of the block producers would ignore your blocks. That they're like, no, these are not according to our rules. So so this part would be very Bitcoinish in that sense, that if you try to produce blocks that other block producers do not accept, then there are no changes to the actual blockchain. So here we kind of presume that all 21 wouldn't collude,
and I agree that in those cases that's fine if there is there's something that they disagree with and they don't approve. But I mean, think about all the different significant parameters that might be upcoming that might not need any kind of referendum or approval if it's not explicit in the Constitution, which is, okay, we already have a RAM token, but we may have like a CPU and bandwidth token. Those are significant decisions because you're creating a new token, right, in the system. So if it's not in the Constitution and the block producers agreed that they should be in there, if there's full consensus, you still don't have consensus of the token holders, right? You only can indirectly vote the block producers out if you disagree.
Yeah, indeed. That was the ideal situation, that people would vote those out with who don't agree to the vision of the token holders. So yeah, that's how it was designed. Of course, it remains to be seen how well it works. It may be that in 1 year all top 21 collude with each other and start to mess around with the network, but we don't know that yet. That remains to be seen. Hopefully, tokens remain distributed. Hopefully, token holders remain distributed. Hopefully, people would continue voting, and hopefully, the top 21 wouldn't collude. So there are a lot of open questions, but let's see where this leads us.
Yeah, so that might be a good topic for next week. Just like the whole collusion with or at least what is it, just the issues that are popping up and the claims of collusion going on. We can talk about that maybe next week. But as far as the Constitution, maybe I'll reach out to you, Ville, about kind of going back and forth about like what you think about the version 2.1 that we have on Google Docs, and anybody else, maybe if you could read that and give me your thoughts, just anything positive or negative. Here, let me put that link again just so that you guys have it. And then we'll just go from there. Just see, if there's any people think this is a decent approach. We'll see. So Justin's been looking at the doc. Thanks for open sourcing it. Oh, you love this? Okay, great. Yeah, can't wait till we can get to do this on chain. So feel free to put comments, and just really appreciate you kind of checking it out, and we'll see if it kind of resonates with more people. So thanks a lot, Justin. So, all right, guys. So I'll see you guys next week. Ville, do you have any last kind of comments?
Oh, no, not really. Unfortunately, I will be for a while a bit busy, but I try to arrange some time to discuss about this very interesting constitution proposal and the point of view, like the point of view that we should restrict block producers instead of users of the blockchain. I think it's a good one. We should research that.
Sounds good, Ville. All right, thanks a lot, Shaheen. He says, thanks, guys. So, all right, awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll keep doing this every week, and hopefully we'll see you guys back. And I hope you have a great week. Bye from EOS SoCal headquarters here.
Bye from Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know if the guys want to say hi. Hey, Alex or Caesar? You guys want to say hi here? What's up, guys? It might be just say we're saying bye.
How's it going?
Hello.
And
how is it going?
When you're in the LA area, just definitely
you guys are always welcome here for sure.
Yeah. I will let you know when I visit.
All right, see you guys.
See you. Bye.
All right.